I want to read to you now a piece. I don't know its source, but that's okay. But it brings out spiritual truth. Now hear this, in light of the intrinsic ability that's in us. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I? To be brilliant, gregarious, talented, famous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightening about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it is in every one of us. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our fear, our presence automatically liberates others. This is part of the speech from Nelson Mandela, inauguration speech in 1994. Now this isn't originated with him, but he used this speech, for whatever intent purpose he used it for. We're using it for a different intent purpose here, to reveal the intrinsic sons of God and the potential that every man has been lit by Christ that comes into the world. Paul discovers it. He calls it the mystery. Christ in us. Christ before the foundations of the world. This Christ, which wasn't Jesus' last name. It means the anointing. The anointing of God and His grace accomplished to His Son has enlightened every man that's come into this world. Not just those after His biblical death, burial, and resurrection, but has been there since the foundation of the world. Else the prophets of old, very few saw it then. Paul manifested it, and they didn't understand it. Yet Paul revealed what the prophets were doing. They were manifesting the intrinsic ability of God, where He's lit every man to come to the world. This veil of flesh, which, like I said, is the world's opinions and ideas, has put a thick layer of flesh around the intrinsic abilities of God locked up within us. I've done a lot of good studies on this. I call it the heart and the subconscious mind, trying to reveal that what I'm talking about is not the latent power of the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind has powers. We've seen it demonstrated by the occult world and mystics and stuff like that. But what I'm talking about reaches beyond that. It reaches to the foundations of this world in the very mind of God, what God had intended and purposed, and how God saw the problem, as I've said, and made a solution, which was Christ slain before the foundation of the world. We were always, without excuse, we all had available power. It's just that many generations were ignorant of this fact, and takes the New Testament and the writings of Paul to reveal the mystery of Christ in us. This power is available. It's not for lack of power. We're afraid of power. As I've said, we're afraid of power because we've had people say, oh, power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yeah, to not understand its source and to act independent from God using these intrinsic abilities or latent subconscious powers that's in each one of us, to use them independent from God is very destructive. God intends that the sons of God be manifested with their abilities, but under His leadership, not walking in the flesh, as it says, or the world's opinions and ideas, the aims and purposes, but walking in the power of the Spirit, led of the Spirit, and learning how to, as Paul mentions, to speak a word in season. Now, a lot of that I'm saying on these tapes, I don't share with many individuals, young in age, that have just entered the spring of this experience. You got to see it like seasons, we enter this life, we're in the spring of youth, in the spring of life, and then we enter into adolescence, where we get into the summer of life and the experience of this life, which God intended we have an experience, good and bad. And later on, at mid-year, 60, 70, 80, we begin to get these feelings of something other than our present world's view of the meaning purpose of life. And we enter into the fall and we leave like the leaves falling from the trees. We lose that which we thought was so permanent and meaningful, and we begin to gain. And then we go into a phase of life which is more like the winter of life, like in the song The Rose. The seed is buried in the snow, and in the spring the rose is manifested. The rose of Sharon, Christ in us. We go through these experiences in our lives. So if you want to just look at our phases of our experience, it was the spring of life, there was the summer of life, then there's the fall of life, then the winter, where what Steve was there lying dormant, and then when the end of this life comes, spring to new life, and the manifested rose of Sharon in us, Christ in us, and the meaning and purpose of life makes sense. We can get that here and now. Like I said, there's not an age fixed on this. If a person's experience had intended to be only 30 years in this life, these tapes are for you at 20, at 25. But for some people, they can't hear this truth until, say, maybe 50, 60 years of age. You get essence of it, you get highlights of it. God's forever giving checks and balances in the experience so we won't get trapped in it. As Paul said, don't look upon the scene. The word look, as I've mentioned over and over again, is not to have a steadfast, longing gaze or grasping rooted in this life and this temporary experience. God never intended it to get permanent. He wanted to be temporary to accomplish something, which he'll do again and again and again. This is only one phase of God's expressing of himself, using his creation, us in that creation, to express who he is, who we are, in light of an eternal experience, not these temporary expressions which God wanted to. Now, this is going to be forever. As far as God expressing himself, how many times is it going to take? Like I said, I'm not talking about karma. That's a misconception of what I'm talking about. They've got it all wrong. Sad. They're close to the truth, but they're far from the truth. Life has more meaning to it than we can begin to imagine. And to have a fear and feel inadequate, feel helpless, as Adam said, feel naked, Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. And we're to gain that power to the glory of God. Now, with this power in this life, and this perspective that I'm sharing here, right? Like the question was asked there, we ask ourselves, who am I to be? Brilliant? Gregarious? Talented? Famous? Yes. You're to be all you can be, like they say in the army, be all you can be. We're to be, if you understand God's purpose of life, success apart from God is not success. For those who gain success, apart from God's method and understanding of the meaning and purpose of life, those who gain success, like Christ said this way, what's a man profit if he gained the whole world and lose his soul, or doesn't know the meaning and purpose of it all? Whereas, as it says in the book of Proverbs, if the foundations be removed, how should a righteous stand? How will you, if you don't hear from God concerning his life, and you succeed in his life apart from God, you can do that. And that's what puzzles some people. I've had people debating with atheists, and the atheists saying, well, my life's great, and I have a wife and kids, and I have a house and a beautiful car, and I have a beautiful job, and make a lot of good money. I don't need God in my life. Well, you can succeed in this world without God. But the end is the profitability of this experience. Ask them the question, what's the meaning, intent, and purpose of life? They can't answer that. Or they can say, no, you to live, experience, then you die. And they figure you get absorbed back in the essence of the earth, and you evolve again. All the stupid ideas they come up with, but there's no real meaning, purpose of life. I believe it was Francis Schaeffer said, he calls this the point of tension. When the big questions come, who am I? What is the meaning, purpose of life? Where am I going? What was its intent? Am I just an accident of evolution? Just by some fluke, the impersonal plus time plus chance produce this thing called humanity? What makes us more superior to the world around us of animals? Are we linked with the animals? Are we a higher creation? They can't answer these questions. They come up with some scurrilous ideas. That's what it says. God will confound the wisdom of the world, but make the wisdom seem like stupidity. You stop and think of it in light of what God has expressed, what He intended. Man's idea is cut off from God. Our minds can really wander off some crazy ideas of our existence and meaning, purpose of life.